Hello everybody, Zaxtor99. The upcoming video is my own submission I submitted to a Reddit in a different series than No Sleep back 10 or 11 years ago. And then I took it down as I decided to try to put it up on my YouTube channel. And I read the first couple of chapters on my YouTube channel, but it never really took off because back then I had less than 1,000 subscribers or whatever. So the upcoming story is, call it the first part of a killer story, a horror story that I started writing 10 years ago. If this video gets enough views, maybe I'll go ahead and continue this as one of my chiller, nighttime horror stories that I've written exclusively myself. So be sure you comment down below. Be sure you like this video if you like it. If you want to hear more of it, want me to write more of it, I would love to do that if that's what people want. So we'll see how many views and how many people are asking for more of Fear of the Dark, a Reddit horror story that I submitted to Reddit more than 10 years ago, and then I finally took down when I uploaded it to YouTube 10 years ago. So here it is, guys, Fear of the Dark, my own writing.
Chapter 1. Shattered Dreams. Emma was sleeping comfortably. Her eyes were in a state of rapid eye movement, REM, when her mother's scream of terror shattered the still night air. She knew her mother's voice well, but a scream like this had never been heard, and when it woke her, chills of terror engulfed her from her head to toe. Her body was now frozen in a fear like she'd never felt in all her life. The summer night air, usually cool at this time of the night with her bedroom window open, now felt thick, heavy, and hot. The soft cotton sheet covering her thin frame felt as if it was pinning her down, trapping her to the mattress of her full-size bed. Instinctively, Emma knew that no imaginary forces were really holding her bedsheet over her body, and that she was really consumed by shock. Every muscle inside of her body felt rigid and tense, ready to leap like a spring, bound tight and then released. Yet despite that, she also felt as if she couldn't move a finger even if she tried to. All she could do was listen as her heartbeat pounded heavy inside of her chest. The scream of her mother faded almost as quickly as it had abruptly broken the silence of the night, and now new horrible sounds could be heard. Emma's eyes looked in the direction of these new strange noises, but the soft lights coming from the starry sky outside of her open-screened window dissipated into the darkness that filled the central hallway. Flesh sounded as if it was being torn, ripped, and shredded by some kind of silent machine unyielding to the human life it was dissecting. Wet and sloppy slurping sounds traveled through the night from the direction of her mother's room, and they grew louder. Perhaps they were getting closer. She really couldn't make out what was making these noises. So she moved her body into a squatting position, her bare feet on her pillow, and her chin just above her upward pointing knees. As she continued to listen to the slurping sounds, she pictured in her mind a ravenous wolf. Or maybe instead it was a big stray dog, hungrily eating a bowl of thick, moist food. Is that a dog, she wondered to herself, as her bony thin arms wrapped around her legs, tucked into herself, and she tried to hold herself still, as if her own trembling might cause her to fall off of her bed. This all just didn't make any sense. Why was some big dog or other animal feasting in her mother's bedroom? And why had her mother screamed so chillingly loud, yet now she was being so dead silent? "Mom?" Emma pleaded dubiously from her bed, somehow hoping that she'd feel the relief of seeing her mom reach in and turn the lights on to ask her if everything was all right. Like back when she was younger, before her father had died of the stroke that had taken his life so unexpectedly. Emma was just 7 years old back then. Emma's life had been turned upside down when she lost her father at such a young age. 8 years ago now, it was still so fresh in her mind as she anxiously waited for her mother to respond to her calling out to her. Her father had been a local police officer and also a strong protector of both Emma and her mother. Somehow he had always seemed to be there when she needed him the most, like the time when she had been so scared to ride her shiny new lime green bike he had purchased for her 6th birthday present. He had calmly encouraged her not to be scared and that she could do it, as he ran beside her with one hand stretched out, helping her balance her bike until she finally had the courage to take off herself. There was also the time when she had failed her first grade spelling bee in front of her whole class, and came home crying, ashamed and embarrassed. Her mother could always comfort and hold her, but something about her father's voice and his faith in her, it could light a fire inside of her and give her the strength to be her best, and always when she had needed it the most. Boy, could she use him now, she thought to herself. Slithering, oily sounds made Emma imagine 1,000 water snakes all writhing, moving and fighting over a morsel of food as she watched the darkness of the hallway beyond the half-open bedroom door. The slippery, fast-moving snake-like sounds were growing closer, faster than Emma could possibly process her own imagination trying to take over. But she couldn't ignore the reality of her growing fears. These sounds were evil. These sounds had killed her mother just seconds ago. That was the reality that broke a dam and freed tears that burst out from her eyes and flowed down the contours of her pretty cheeks. Emma felt the salt in her tears burn her eyes, and her heart exploded inside her chest with heartache like she hadn't felt since her father died. But there was a determination inside of her now, a desire to live. She swore she could feel her father's presence deep inside of her, and he was urging her to make that leap. Her jump had sprung her from her coiled position on her bed towards her doorway. It was in mid-air that she finally saw it. She desperately pulled her feet up higher as her momentum pushed her over the top of it. Just the glimpse of it that she got was all she needed to feel the panic she already had intensify immediately into uncontrollable body convulsions of sheer fright. It was a massive humanoid-shaped darkness of moving, twisting, thin, vine-like tangles. Each vine creepily moved and slithered like a snake, and each one moved separately and in a completely random direction before finally moving inward towards its dark soul of this unimaginably horrifying creature. The vines moving throughout its lurid form looked wet and grainy, like slimy ash-colored sand. Random specks of crimson red on each moving vine-like tentacle made the beast look like an eerie night sky, twinkling bright stars being replaced by slow-moving small goblets of glowing red blood, moving multi-directionally in and out of its hulkish shape. The fright caused from seeing this evil thing kept Emma from ducking her head in time, and the impact of her head smashing into the hard wooden doorframe sent jolts of pain down through her spine. When she fell to the floor, her ankles gave way and she stumbled forward, falling hard face first into the hallway just outside her room. Several dark, shapeless arms formed from the beast's midsection and shot out like shooting arrows towards Emma's ankles. Quickly wrapping themselves around her ankles, the beast used its newly formed arms like winches to start pulling Emma by her feet inward towards its hungry soul at the center of its flowing, twisting mass. She felt its grip pulling her backwards face first across the carpet. The fresh blood from her nose made a trail from where her face had hit the floor. Her body was numb, however she could feel the trickle of blood flowing through and out of her nostrils, causing a tingling, irritating pain inside her nose. This would be the least of her worries within mere seconds, however, as her feet were about to be pulled right into the living, hissing nightmare. Emma's scream shot out into the night and replicated too closely her own mother's last fearful death cry just a moment in time earlier. Only this scream would not be heard by any other living creature, except for the dark beast itself. Chapter 2. Sliced Up in the Dark. It was pain like she had never felt before. Her toes first, followed quickly by her foot, and it felt like hundreds of razor-sharp knives slicing completely through them. Her brain was in overload from the millions of nerve signals sending her the messages of awful pain. She didn't think about it. She couldn't think about it. She just reacted violently and instinctively. Her leg muscles pulled her torso closer to the beast, chopping away at her left foot, just before her right foot entered its snake-like exterior. And then, with her knees now slightly bent, they snapped rigidly straight and away from this nightmarish horror. Her foot being sliced up stayed inside the beast, and her leg was free. Emma awkwardly fell with a hop right back to her face, just a couple of feet away. The beast reacted just as quickly, however, and once again shot out its tentacles towards her. The tentacles were too late this time, and missed Emma's legs, which stumbled her flailing body away and out into the hall. Her body crashed into the far wall of the hallway, but the wall actually kept her upright as she turned and hopped away on her right foot as quickly as she could manage. She heard the hissing of the dark beast grow louder behind her, and figured that it wasn't far behind as she made it to her front door. Even though the darkness of her living room made it nearly impossible to see with the long closed drapes over the windows, Emma felt her way quickly and scared for her life to unlocking the doorknob and deadbolt above. She threw the door open and crashed through the screen door, which was already unlatched and slightly ajar. However, the front steps of her porch stopped her, as she didn't want to stumble and fall again with only her right leg supporting her. She felt her heart pound even harder now. Emma knew that she needed time, a few seconds more than she had now, to make an attempt to stagger down the 8 steps of her porch. She had to do something to try to slow the beast down. To close her front door meant turning around to face it once again. But would there be time? When she hopped in place and turned around, she didn't see it, and then realized she also didn't hear its hissing either. Her right leg made a powerful jump to get her back to the front door, and she opened the screen door again to reach in and close the front door. It was right then when she heard those same wet, slithering, snake-like sounds she had heard while sitting up in her bed, not knowing yet then what this thing was. Before she pulled the front door closed to act as a hopeful barrier between this evil dark beast and herself, she searched the darkness of the living room for its shadows. The slithering sounds were coming from beneath where she was looking, however, and when she lowered her eyes, she saw it again. This time it looked completely different than it had looked in her bedroom before. Now the beast looked like a large pile of slowly moving entangled snakes, hissing angrily and almost sounding as if there were some demonic whisper hidden within the hisses. Even though the now shapeless evil was moving slower than Emma expected, it was within just a couple of feet from the open front door where she stood. Emma snapped out of her fixation on the snakes, creeping closer, and her left hand pulled the front door closed. She turned back around, hopping on her right leg to let the screen door slam close behind her as she made her way back towards the steps leading down and towards the street below. As she made her way down the steps, holding onto the railing on the right side, Emma started to feel the pain once again from her left foot that had been chewed up by the beast. She had not even looked at the damage yet in her desperate attempt to escape. However, she knew that something would have to be done soon to prevent blood loss from killing her. She knew she needed a doctor, but getting away from the snake beast was her top priority right now. As she made the bottom of the steps, she held on to the post that made the left side of the entrance arch looking at her house from the street. Using the post to keep her steady, she turned back to look for the beast or the snake pile. There was nothing to be seen. However, just as she thought she heard the snakes hissing near the top of the stairs, she heard a car racing towards her, followed by its horn. It wasn't close enough to be at her house. However, it wasn't very far away either. When Emma turned away from the snakes hissing towards the top of the stairs back towards the street, she saw that the car was parked in the middle of the street 2 houses down from her own. The interior lights were on inside the car, and it looked as if a man was looking towards the house across the street and 2 houses down from her own, The honking continued, and the driver of the car seemed to be holding down the horn in an attempt to get someone out of that house and get gone fast. The house, Emma knew, was where Mr. and Mrs. Fredericks lived. They were an elderly couple, both in their 70s, who seemed very friendly every time Emma had briefly spoke to them in the past. They had recently had their granddaughter come to live with them, and she was a pretty, well-shaped lady with long blonde hair in her mid-20s. She didn't know her name, but Emma guessed that she was the target of this man's wild honking in front of the Fredericks' home. Emma let go of her hold on the post and hopped with excitement towards the honking car. After a few hops towards the car, she saw a figure who looked to be the granddaughter of the Fredericks. Emma stood on her right leg and waved her arms above her head and screamed out, "Help me, over here!" as she faced the car and the lady figure running towards it. As the lady opened the opposite front car door of the driver and got inside, Emma continued to scream, "Help me!" and wave her arms back and forth over her head. She knew she needed help, and this might be her only chance. The car turned towards her and sped up as it approached, the bright headlights blinding Emma from seeing the man and the woman inside. The car quickly came to a screeching halt in front of her house. The lights now pointed down the street to her left. Emma heard the man and woman arguing inside the car now, and she also knew that in fact the lady was the Fredericks' granddaughter. She had assumed it was. The dark-haired man barely gave Emma a glance before turning back to the lady and yelling at her, "Damn it, Megan! I told you that your grandfolks would be dead. Now we just got to get the hell out of here." It was right then that Emma's relief of seeing help pull up beside her turned into cold, dark fear. The man turned his gaze back on Emma and now pushed the barrel of a 30-06 rifle from his lap out of his open car window, and it pointed directly at her. The last thing Emma heard was the lady named Megan scream, "Todd, please don't!" in anguish, and then she felt it, and her body collapsed to the ground. That's the end of Chapter 2. Please like, share, and subscribe. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and watching the second chapter of my first ever original novel. Thanks again. This has been Zaxtor99.